Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Wednesday, the 31st of October, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. The general election is less than a week away, and workers across the country are getting ready for this historic day. Next, Michael Chihak has an interview with Arizona's Secretary of State who addresses preparations and expected voter turnout.
A little more than a week out from the general election. Are we ready?
I think so. We're running around the state, testing all of the equipment that the counties are preparing to use. Each county has to test each piece of equipment that they plan on using, and then we come in twice before each election and do a random selection of some of the equipment, and the counties have mailed us some blank ballots that could actually have been used in the election, and then we pre-mark them so that we know what the result will be, and they don't. And then we have them select certain equipment. We run the ballots through just like it was election day. And if it comes up exactly correct, they can use their equipment. If not, we have to identify what is going wrong, and they have to either repair or replace the equipment. But so far, everything's worked out.
And based on history, how often do those work out? Is it a pretty good percentage?
Well, it has to work out every time. Usually what we find, if there is a minor discrepancy, and it's usually 1 or 2 votes, is that it's usually more of a human error thing where when somebody's feeding in the test ballots, they feed 2 in at one time or something like that. And so we can identify, we know how many ballots we have in the test deck and how many we're supposed to go through each machine. We go through and research all of that and find that usually somebody has put 2 in instead of 1 or something like that. So we restart, and we have to get it down to exact, correct results before they can use that equipment in the machine, in the election.
3 million or more people registered to vote in Arizona, and the breakdown is expected to be announced any day by your office. How many Republicans, how many Democrats, how many independents. But the trend has been toward more people registering independent and moving away from the 2 major parties, Republican and Democratic. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that don't think of themselves as a pure Republican or a pure Democrat, in the sense that, very few people vote kind of a straight ticket. We've got an old election machine that's probably 8 feet wide and 7 or 8 feet tall, and had the booth that you went in. It's got all these levers, and one of the levers used to be that you could just flip a lever for voting one party, and it would cast a ballot for everyone and only in that party. But I think very few people do that anymore. There's a lot of people that find themselves intrigued by concepts that are not entirely held within one party or another. And so in the last, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, the percentage of voters who identified themselves as not affiliated with either of the 2 major parties, or sometimes we call them independents. But some people think, well, I'm now in the independent party, but that's really not a party. It's just you're not affiliated with the other 2. But that group passed the Democrat Party registration in the state for the first time. And that independent group now is right at about 33%. The Republicans are still at about 36%, and the Democrats as a group have dropped to about 30%. But I think it's just people who want to vote for the person that they feel will do the best job, and sometimes that's a Republican and sometimes that's a Democrat.
Early voting has become a movement all of its own in Arizona and in many states. What are those numbers looking like this year? They've been on the rise over the course of time.
Yes, they have been steadily rising, and I think at the last statewide election, nearly 2/3 of Arizona voters voted by mail. 1/3 of the voters still like to go to the polls. But I think this year we'll probably see the early voters or the mail-in ballots creep up a little bit more. I think we'll be somewhere in the 2/3 of the state, maybe approaching 70% will vote by mail.
That early voter phenomenon has changed the nature of political campaigning, but has it also changed the meaning of Election Day? Is Election Day less relevant now? Is it more of just a deadline than an event?
Election Day is still Election Day, and it reminds, or I think I probably should take the opportunity to remind voters that even if you are mailing in your ballot, The critical factor or deadline is that ballot has to be in the possession of the recorder's office by 7 p.m. on Election Day. So it's not when you put it in the mail. You can't put it in the mail on Election Day. So we recommend to people that if they have received a ballot by mail, to mail it no later than probably the Thursday before the election. If you get to the Friday or the weekend, or especially Monday or Tuesday Election Day, do not put a ballot in the mail. Just bring it to one of the recorder's locations or a polling location. We still have, obviously, an election day, but the early balloting has really created an election period where voters are casting their ballots 30 to 45 days before the election and up to Election Day. And so it's really created a new challenge for candidates to have to try to contact voters much earlier than they used to have to.
Arizona is a focal point in the national scene because of a U.S. Senate race and the hotly contested race and the hot contest to see which party controls the U.S. Senate. Is that, plus the presidential race, plus a lot of important local races, going to drive turnout this year, do you think?
Well, I think we will have a good turnout in Arizona. I don't know that we'll quite reach what were almost record levels 4 years ago when we had an Arizona U.S. Senator, John McCain, on the top of the Republican ticket, and the excitement related to President Obama's candidacy. But 4 years ago, we had about 78% turnout in the presidential election. So I think all of that is going to hopefully bring us close to that, a little bit above the 75% turnout level that we experienced 4 years ago.
Ahead of the elections, many people pay attention to candidate endorsements from different publications, such as the major newspapers in their communities. The endorsements are often used by the candidates in their advertising campaigns, but are criticized by those who are not happy with the results. We decided to get more information about the process, and for that, we are joined by Sarah Garrecht Gassen. She is an editorial writer for the Arizona Daily Star. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me.
So I've never been part of the process for an endorsement of a candidate. How does it work at the Star?
Well, at the Star, we take very seriously the endorsement process, and we view it as a community service, basically, because we're in a position to be able to see candidates, interact with them. We devote an awful lot of research time to it in a way that other people, leading their busy lives may not have. So what we do is we bring in people to come and talk to us who are running for office. We invite candidates. Usually we like to invite people who are running for the same office at the same time, because you get a lot of information just about how people interact with each other. Sometimes if there's a race where there's an enormous number of candidates, like TUSD this year, we go to forums, or we, rather than trying to wrangle everyone into one interview. So the way we do it is we ask people to come in. The editorial board is comprised of me and Bobby Joe Buell, who's the editor in charge of the whole paper, and John Humanick, who's the publisher and in charge of the whole operation. And what we do is we divvy up candidates, we do our research, we invite people to come in. Sometimes they come in for an interview, sometimes they don't. And that's only part of the process.
You say this is sort of like conducting a job interview, at least in your case.
Right.
What are you looking for?
We're looking for people who can do the job that they're running for, who are educated about the issues, who have something more than a campaign stump speech like "we got to take back our country," and things that any one of us who were pretending to run for office could come up with off the top of our heads. We're looking for, what do you have specific to offer, ideas about not just the big things, but if you're running for state house, for example, what are some district-specific things that you think need to get changed, and how would you get that done? We're interested in specifics a lot more than just kind of political platitudes. And
in these days, many people place a lot of emphasis on charisma.
Right.
And, am I a smooth talker, am I not? How does that come into the equation?
Well, I think people respond to people in different ways. Some candidates are very charismatic. They're very polished. They come across They know how to sell themselves. And other candidates might be more based in the issues. They may be less outgoing. And other people are just sort of new to the process. So I would much rather have a candidate who is familiar with the issues, is educated, can convey their ideas clearly, rather than someone who looks great, sounds great, but then when you're done with the interview, you realize they didn't really say anything.
And we only have about a minute left, so it's interesting because you and I were talking about how we've both been staying so busy because this is the general election. You've actually had a chance to meet many, many candidates from different races. What are some of the major ones that you've endorsed? Or not the people per se, but just the races?
We've endorsed for president. We weren't able to get either of those candidates to come in, unfortunately. But we had the senatorial candidates come in. We had the congressional district candidates come in. There were a couple races where not everyone wanted to appear. That was fine. Because it's not like if you don't come to the interview, we're not going to endorse you. That's part of the overall process. And I also think it's important for people to understand that the editorial board is separate from the news coverage. So it's the kind of thing where we look to their coverage, we take that into account, but they're two separate things.
Okay, Sarah Garrecht Gassen, thank you very much for joining us, and keep up the good work. Thank you. In addition to voting for different candidates during the election, residents will also get to decide on issues that can have a big impact on their lives. This year, for example, there are 9 propositions on the Arizona ballot. Michael Chihak joins us with an interview about Proposition 116. It's a proposed amendment to the Constitution that relates to property tax exemptions.
Tell us about 116. What would it do?
This proposition is very straightforward. Essentially, it would give businesses a bigger break on the taxes they pay on acquired property and equipment, anything outside of real estate.
Proponents call it a job creation proposition. Is it that? And is there any estimate of what kind of jobs and how many it would create?
Advocates certainly would agree that it would help in the job creation. Anything that hinders, if a business could acquire new equipment without heavy taxation, then they can hire more employees to put together that new equipment, or to use it, or use it to expand their businesses. And so, to that extent, yes, indeed, it is. It could lead to new jobs.
Now, opponents say it could also shift tax burdens to homeowners because that revenue has to come from somewhere to be made up for in what's lost on the business side. Talk about that a little bit.
That's the argument that opponents will make. However, according to the legislative budget analysis, indicates that the actual impact of this thing on homeowners is minimal. They use an example of it would cost the average homeowner no more than $3 a year. And the same applies to the potential impact on local government. There, too, the impact is minimum. And that's from the Joint Legislative Budget Committee findings.
Which does analysis of all kinds of state budgetary and
Indeed.
Finance matters from an objective viewpoint.
That's
right?
correct.
There also were worries expressed about the duality of the system, because what the proposition would do is set up a before and after scenario. Taxes would be paid at the old level on equipment already in place before 2013, and at the lower level on equipment that's purchased and installed from 2013 on. And the State Revenue Department says it may not have the capacity to handle double bookkeeping there. Is that correct?
A representative from the Department of Revenue made that case during one of the budget hearing committees earlier in the year. And he said currently they do not have the computer systems, the databases and the software and so forth, to handle both parallel tax systems. And they do not know, and should this thing pass, when or how much it will take to bring that system online.
So there wasn't any solution to that offered when that part of the discussion came up?
Not at that time. Presumably, it's a solvable problem, but it's just something else that's sort of hanging out there, depending on if this passes in November or not.
And then it's worth noting, as you did in the analysis that you wrote for Morrison, that this passed both houses of the legislature unanimously. How unusual is that?
Very unusual, I'm sorry to say. There was virtually no disagreement between Republicans and Democrats on this. There's a general consensus that this is probably good for business. It's a good way to help spur job creation, and who can argue with that?
E.J. Perkins, policy analyst for the Morrison Institute for Public Policy. Thanks for speaking with me about Proposition 116.
Thank you.
Now we continue the conversation with Proposition 117. This is also a proposed amendment to the Constitution which relates to property tax assessed valuation.
We're talking about Proposition 117 today, property tax valuation limits. Explain what it would do.
Well, basically what this would do is simplify the property tax system by creating a single valuation that would not increase by more than 5% annually.
Does it do as intended by its proponents? That is, does it simplify Arizona's very complex property tax code?
It seems to. Right now, the state has a very complicated tax system, and it's broken into two components, as a lot of homeowners may know. There's the full cash value, and then there's what's called a limited property value, and taxes are calculated based on that. The full cash value number is something that funds bonds, budget overrides, and things like that. The limited value is calculated by a statutory formula, and that funds things like maintenance, operation of school districts, and items like that. So that did give you a little background on what those two values are used for.
Opponents say that the problem with this proposition is that it doesn't limit taxes themselves, it only limits the valuation increase, and it still would allow local jurisdictions to set tax rates that would continue to increase taxes without limits. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of how this works.
And opponents also seem to include folks who are on the more conservative side on this, want greater limits on taxes, tax rates, tax valuations. And in fact, there seems to be a bit of a California Proposition 13 style tax increase limit movement behind the opposition. Have you encountered that in your look at this proposition?
Yes, it seems to be moving in that direction, or at least that's the hope that advocates hope it will eventually evolve into. Now, whether that actually happens or not is another matter. Advocates say that the property tax system will stabilize the system and insulate the taxpayers from higher taxes, or rather dramatic increases or surges in their tax bills. And so that's their principal argument. You saw that during the downturn, 2006 to 2008, when valuations skyrocketed and tax bills sort of went along with that. And so it is hoped that this would help temper those kinds of fluctuations.
Do you see any sign in this that it may be a stepping stone toward a Proposition 13 style amendment down the road at all?
There's a possibility of that happening, depending on how this fares in the November elections.
Proposition 13, of course, was the California amendment from 2 or 3 decades ago that put very strict limits on how much property taxes could increase as long as the same person owned the home from year to year, right?
That's correct, yes.
E.J. Perkins, policy analyst for the Morrison Institute for Public Policy. Thanks for speaking with me.
Thank you.
An increasing number of Americans are becoming more interested in sustainable farming and food systems, and experts say refugees and immigrants can help out by providing their knowledge and labor to produce the growing need for small-scale organic products. Next, Luis Carrion tells us about the National Immigrant Farming Initiative.
Farming is being transformed across the United States. Large-scale industrial farming has become the norm, and small family-owned and operated farms are increasingly becoming a thing of the past.
We saw that the rural farm, the small farms, the family farms were disappearing, and the newer generation is not replacing the parents and the grandparents on their farming activity.
Dr. Rigoberto Delgado is executive director of the National Immigrant Farming Initiative. He was recently a panelist at the first annual Border Food Summit held in Rio Rico, Arizona. He says a large number of immigrants and refugees arrive in this country with a deep understanding and appreciation for sustainable farming and food systems. He points out these new residents are in a good position to step in and fill an increased demand for small-scale organic agricultural products.
You see that the immigrant farmers and the refugee farmers are the growing population in the farming sector. So we thought that it would be necessary to put together an initiative to address the needs and provide technical assistance and advocacy for that population of immigrant and refugee and ACLE farmers that come to the States with a dream of doing agriculture the way they were doing in their country of origin.
Agriculture in their country of origin usually means a small-scale operation, one that makes use of natural resources in a sustainable fashion. According to Dr. Delgado, his organization works with a broad range of new citizens to leverage their agricultural knowledge and to help them become productive farmers in many parts of the country.
So you get agronomists, you get vets, you get all kinds of people that have to come. In the case of the refugees, they have no choice because they were helping our armed forces abroad, and if they stay home, they risk their life because sometimes they consider them traitors in their own country. So they had to come. In the case of immigrants, they came on their own decision, but still, they don't know the rules and the departments of agriculture, and the paperwork is very complicated, so that's where we come in.
The National Immigrant Farming Initiative was established in 2002 and is rooted in the immigrant farmer experience. The nonprofit advocates for immigrant farmers and offers support in navigating the often complicated layers of regulations that characterize the industry.
We do provide the technical support and the advocacy for them, and also how to navigate through the paperwork of the bureaucracy and be successful and get loans and then buy land or whatever they have in their vision. So the way we do it is we come together, have a meeting, some others don't know each other at the beginning, and build up a group. And they are the ones that we facilitate the naming their group. How do you want to call your project?
NIFI has played an important role in establishing successful small-scale agricultural operations throughout the country, says Dr. Delgado. He points out that the decline of the family farm has opened up opportunities for new arrivals.
The average of the American farmer right now is 57 years old. And then if you look at the 75-year-old farmers, they decrease 20%. And then the younger generation, 35 to 40, 45, that decrease 30%. So they're going to disappear. And who's going to replace them if it's not that wave of immigrant farmers, of refugees that are eager to get a piece of land and be part of this country and build prosperity in rural America, you see. So that's our mission, to make sure that they get what they need. And we do a research on what are their needs and how we can better help them to solve them. And that's what we're all about.
Dr. Delgado says the National Immigrant Farming Initiative is currently assisting several projects in the Southwest region, helping new residents become productive farmers.
In tonight's video postcard from photographer and editor Santiago Bati, we pay a short visit to Bacalu Farms, where you can find a variety of pumpkins that you can harvest. You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, you might think the election season and all those political signs provide a great economic boost for local sign companies, but most of the ones we spoke to don't see a bump in business. Also, meet the new director of the International Rescue Committee, and the coffee expert discusses his passion. I'm Tony Paniagua. From all of us at Arizona Public Media, have a great night.